Ever feel like you are stuck in a weird paradox? You are trying to save every penny, but your bank account just seems to get smaller. The news is constantly screaming about a booming economy, but your paycheck hasn't seen a real raise in years. So you think, okay, maybe I should learn some economics. But the second you open a book, you are bombarded with jargon like GDP, quantitative easing, and inflation, and your eyes just glaze over. Does figuring out how to manage your life really have to be this complicated? What if I told you it doesn't? What if the entire story of our economy, from a single dollar to a global financial crisis, could be explained with a simple fable? That is the magic of the book we're breaking down today, How an Economy Grows and Why It Crashes. It all starts on a tiny, isolated island. Part 1, the setup. The bare bones of an economy. On this island live just 3 guys, Abel, Baker, and Charlie. Their life is brutally simple. Every day, they wade into the water and try to catch fish with their bare hands. Each man can catch exactly 1 fish per Dalton Y. That is just enough to eat. There are no savings, no loans, and definitely no economic policy. If you don't catch a fish, you starve. You might be thinking, wow, that is primitive. But you'd be right. This is the starting point for every economy. The money in your pocket, the house you live in, the stocks you trade. Every single piece of our modern world can be traced back to the fundamental questions these 3 guys faced. How do we get more food? How do we save for tomorrow? Survive. How an economy grows is brilliant, because it strips away all the fancy packaging and confusing terms of modern finance, and lets us see the actual bones of how it all works. So, let me take you on this journey. We'll start with the very first fishing net Abel ever wove. We'll see how a fish can become money, and then how that money can become worthless. And finally, we'll see how the island's good life started to fall apart, step by step, the moment the government. You are about to discover that the answers to the biggest questions puzzling economists today are hidden in this simple story about 3 guys trying to catch more fish. Part 2, the spark of growth. Capital and delayed gratification. So, if an economy is a giant tree, what are its roots? The book shows us in the clearest way possible. It is the courage to go hungry today for the wisdom of not being hungry tomorrow. The story begins with Abel, Baker, and Charlie stuck in their daily grind. 1 fish a day, just enough to survive. They're trapped by the immediate problem of finding food, with no time or energy to think about anything else. But one night, Abel looks up at the stars and thinks, is this it? Is my whole life just going to be about catching 1 fish a day? He dreams of bigger things, building a decent hut, making real clothes, maybe even directing the first ever island documentary. But all of that time is Spain fade. Then an idea strikes him. What if I built a tool to help me fish? A net. Now, weaving a net from bark and vines sounds simple, but it holds the first secret to all economic growth. Capital is born from delayed consumption. See, to build the net, Abel would have to spend an entire day not fishing. That means for 1 full day, he would have to go hungry. Baker and Charlie laughed at him. Are you nuts? Starve for a day just for a flimsy net. What if it doesn't work? You'll be hungry and empty-handed tomorrow. But Abel took the risk. He spent the day hungry, his stomach growling, weaving his net, and fueled only by the hope of future fish. The next day, he cast his net into the water, and it worked. He caught 2 fish in a single day. This simple breakthrough is one of the most fundamental concepts in economics. Capital doesn't just appear out of thin air. It is created by sacrificing consumption in the present and taking a risk for a future reward. Abel's net is capital. You can't eat it, but it makes you more productive. And to create it, he had to delay his consumption, go hungry, and bear the risk that his idea might fail. This is the story of all human progress. Early humans had to stop gathering berries to spend time sharpening a rock. A farmer had to save his seeds and, instead of eating them, to plant a crop for next year. A business owner has to reinvest profits into new machinery, instead of spending it all on a lavish lifestyle. This is the true starting point of economic growth. You have to sacrifice first, to gain later. Part 3. The birth of finance. The wisdom of lending. With his new net, Abel was now catching 2 fish a day. He'd eat one and save the other. Baker and Charlie saw this and were green with envy. They wanted nets too, but they weren't willing to starve for a day to make them. So, Baker came up with a proposal. "Hey Abel, what if you lend each of us one of your extra fish? Once we make our nets and start catching more, we'll pay you back." Abel thought about it. He had 2 choices. Keep his saved fish for himself, as a safety net. Lend his fish out, risking that they might fail, but with the potential to get a bigger return. He chose to lend them the fish. Sure enough, Baker and Charlie used the borrowed fish to survive their day of net making. Soon, they were also catching 2 fish a day. The island's total fish production jumped from 3 per Dalton Y to 6. Everyone was wealthier. This reveals the second key secret of economics. The true purpose of savings isn't just to hoard. It is to direct resources to people and projects that create even more value. If Abel had just kept his fish, it would have always just been 1 fish. But by lending it to Baker and Charlie, it was transformed into 2 fish. Why? Because they used it to create capital, a net that boosted their productivity. This is the essence of lending. It is not exploitation. It is a partnership. It is the same reason we put money in a bank. The bank lends our savings to an entrepreneur to start a company. The company succeeds, pays back the loan with interest, and the bank gives us a cut. But what if Baker had borrowed the fish, not to build a net, but to take the day off and go on a fish catching? The outcome would be completely different. Baker would have no net and no fish to repay the loan. Abel's savings would be gone, and the island would be no richer. So, the lesson is clear. Debt itself isn't good or bad. What matters is what it is used for. Productive loan, borrowing to build a net, creates more value. This is smart debt. Consumptive loan, borrowing for a vacation, creates no new value. This is risky debt. Emergency loan, borrowing to survive an illness. A necessary form of support. Unfortunately, in the real world, many people get this backward. They rack up credit card debt to buy designer bags, fancy vacations, and new phones, consumptive loans. But they're hesitant to borrow for a degree or a certification that could boost their income, a productive loan. That is not using debt as a tool. That is just mortgaging your future. Part 4. Money, money, money. And its problems. As the island's fish supply grew, life got better. People were no longer just surviving. They started specializing. One guy built huts. Another made clothes. A third started giving surfing lessons. The economy was diversifying, but this created a new problem. Bartering is a massive pain. The canoe builder, Duffy, wanted a new shirt. But the shirt maker didn't need a canoe, she needed fish. The guy with extra fish, however, wanted surfing lessons. Getting a 3-way trade to happen was a logistical nightmare. So, the islanders came up with a brilliant idea. They would use one thing that everyone valued as a universal medium of exchange. Fish. Everyone needs to eat. And everyone had a general idea of what a fish was worth. Just like that, fish became the island's official currency. But this simple invention, designed to make life easier, would eventually become the source of all their problems. A fish can be used as money, not because it was special, but because everyone believed it had value. It is the same reason we accept paper bills today. Not because the paper is valuable, but because we can exchange it. However, for a monetary system to remain stable, one rule is non-negotiable. The amount of money in circulation must be tied to the amount of real stuff being produced. If the islanders are only catching 100 real fish a day, but there are 200 fish notes floating around, then each note is going to buy you less real fish. This is the seed of inflation. At first, the system worked beautifully. Builders were hired, tools were bought, and money acted as a lubricant, helping resources flow efficiently. But things started to go wrong when the islanders created a central bank and started issuing paper certificates called fish reserve notes to represent the real fish held in storage. Soon, someone had a dangerous thought. It is a lot easier to print a piece of paper than it's to catch a fish. This temptation to create wealth out of thin air was the root of all the trouble to come. Part 5. How good times go bad. When government steps in. As the island prospered, a new player emerged, the government. Initially, the government acted like a simple night watchman. It handled defense, a legal system, and building lighthouses, essential services paid for by taxes, which everyone agreed to. But over time, the government's role began to expand and expand. A charismatic politician, Speaker Frankie, realized he could win votes by printing money to give people benefits. He started issuing fish vouchers to the unemployed and subsidies to people building new huts. On the surface, everyone felt richer. They had more money in their hands. But the number of real fish being caught hadn't changed. The inevitable result: more money chasing the same amount of goods. The size of each fish you could buy got smaller. Prices shot through the roof. The hard-earned savings of the islanders were silently being devalued. The government didn't stop there. It pressured the banks to loosen their lending standards. They created government-backed entities, cleverly named Hotline May and Hot Mac, to guarantee housing loans, even for people who had no realistic way to pay them back. The banks loved this. Why worry about risk when the government promised to bail them out? So they started handing out loans to anyone and everyone. A massive housing bubble began to form. People borrowed recklessly to buy huts, convinced that prices would only go up. No one cared at highway. Does this sound familiar? It is a perfect parallel to the 2008 subprime mortgage crisis in the United States. The government also got into the business of economic stimulus. It funded massive public works projects, like lighthouses on cliffs, where no ships ever sailed. They called it investing in the economy, but really, it was just spending for the sake of spending. The fish, real resources, that could have been used to build better nets or more productive tools, were being wasted on useless projects. Worst of all, the government became an expert at spinning the narrative: inflation. They called it healthy economic growth. Your fish shrinking, they called it technological downsizing. They wrapped their bad policies in complicated jargon, and most people just nodded along. When the government shifts from being a referee to being the star player, the true signals of the economy get distorted. And that is how a bubble gets blown to epic proportions. Part 6. The bubble bursts. The inevitable crash. At the peak of the island's heat, nobody believed the party would ever end. Everyone was borrowing to buy and flip huts. The banks bundled these risky loans into complex financial products and sold them off. Even the poorest islander could get a zero-down loan to buy a second home. But tides always turn. One day, the most luxurious volcano view, huts suddenly stopped selling. The developer went bankrupt. Panic set in. Everyone tried to sell their huts at once, but there were no buyers. Hut prices, which had been 100 fish yesterday, crashed to 50. Then 20. The people with zero-down loans simply walked away, leaving the banks holding a pile of worthless huts and bad debt. Hardly we went bust. The financial crisis was like a row of falling dominoes. The builders, the decorators, the material suppliers. Everyone lost their jobs. The island's economy plunged into a deep depression. And what was the government's first reaction? More of the same poison. They bailed out the banks. They printed even more fish vouchers and handed them out. They launched a cash for clunkers-style program to get people to trade in their old donkey carts for new ones. But all of these cures only treated the symptoms, not the disease. The island's fundamental problem was that it wasn't catching enough real fish. Printing more paper money just made the paper more worthless. The final nail in the coffin came when the Middle Kingdom Empire, a large industrious island that had been selling goods to our islanders in exchange for their fish notes, finally wisened up. They stopped accepting the paper and demanded payment in real fish. With its credit cut off, the island's economy completely collapsed. Conclusion. What we can learn. The unchanging truth. When you close the book on this little island, you realize something profound. The rules of economics have never been that complicated. The only things that can truly make life better are simple and timeless. Be like Abel. Go hungry to weave your net. Savings are your foundation. Delayed gratification is a superpower. Don't spend everything you earn today. Invest a portion of it in your future fishing net. Whether that is a new skill, a business, or a financial asset, know the difference between net-building debt and vacation debt. Debt isn't inherently evil, but it is a dangerous tool if misused. Borrowing money to learn a skill that increases your income is good debt. Borrowing money for a luxury you can't afford is bad debt. One builds your future. The other steals from it. See through the money illusion. When prices go up, it is not always because things are more valuable. It is often because the money used to buy them is less valuable. The best way to fight inflation isn't to chase speculative bubbles, but to invest in your own core productivity. A doctor's value is in their skill, a programmer's in their code, a chef's in their craft. Your ability to catch fish is the most reliable asset you will ever have. Beware of the free lunch. Government benefits, subsidies, and easy credit always sound great. But there is no such thing as a free lunch. The cost is always paid somewhere, either through higher taxes, inflation that devalues your savings, or the painful bursting of a bubble that they helped create. At its core, economics is about living sustainably. The islanders learned the hard way that true prosperity doesn't come from printed money or inflated hut prices. It comes from producing more, consuming less than you produce, saving wisely, and working hard. For each of us, the logic for living a good life is exactly the same. Stop looking for shortcuts. Start by weaving your net. Don't be fooled by fake booms. Focus on real value. And don't let debt become your master. Congratulations. You've just absorbed the wisdom of another great book. Hopefully, this story of a small island gives you a much clearer view of the economy, your wealth, and your own life.